Well, happy Tuesday, everyone. Welcome to the Dr. Laurie Davis Show. My co-host, Dr. Ramin Modiri. Tuesdays, always about money, business, finance. Good morning, or no, good afternoon, Ramin. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Good morning from West Coast,
Yes, good afternoon
California.
from
Good morning.
Alberta, right?
Yes.
So, how are things? Do you want to give us a fire update? How's the air quality? And you've had some rain and
Yes. Different story than 2 weeks ago. So we
Mhm.
had nice rain, and it stopped yesterday, and it's supposed to be sunny. Supposed to be for the rest of the week. It's cool with our standards. So it's been like in 50s and 60s. So,
Mhm.
but it's beautiful. I just love the sunshine after the rain, and
Mhm.
it's nice to have that cold and cool winter feeling. Although, if anyone from up north was here, would be in a tank top swimming in the ocean while
With
we
our
are
shorts
wearing
and flip
that
flops.
exactly. Yes, and we are in like jackets and overcoats and well, everything's relative, right? So, but
Yes.
thank God, I think the fires are mostly contained and we
Mhm.
haven't had anything new. So we are grateful
That's
for that. Yeah.
yeah, that's so good to hear. I think the big problem now is where we're going to put that toxic waste, right?
Oh, there's yeah,
Like where's it going to go? What do they do with that? So that's the next question and the mudslides, but
yeah,
anyway, it's nice to see that everything's kind of, you know, settling down.
yeah.
And before we get started, I just want to do a couple of plugs for the
Please.
channel, the disability channel. Because yesterday, Sylvia and I, here's a coincidence. Sylvia and I interviewed Fraser Newcomb. He's an entertainer from Nova Scotia. All right. So he is heading out to British Columbia to the West Coast to support the Disability Channel with their part in the Invictus Games, which are
Right,
coming up. That was all spearheaded by Prince Harry, and it's disabled veterans, injured veterans, the disabled community. So there are about 500 participants this year, and it's like the Olympics, right?
right,
So Fraser's going out to support the fundraisers. So they're going to different legions, and he's performing, and some of our other Canadian cohorts are performing. So we're having that chat with Sylvia,
right,
and he said, in May we're doing a tour in Ontario, which is where Sylvia lives in
right.
Niagara Falls, right? And she said, "Oh my goodness, I have tickets." Her girlfriend across the hall said, "There's this guy coming from Nova Scotia. He does tributes to Johnny Cash, Hank Williams Sr., to Stomp and Tom, you know." And let's get a ticket and go because it's dinner and entertainment and everything. So Sylvia lands on the show yesterday, not realizing that we'll be interviewing the guy that she's bought tickets to go to a concert in Niagara Falls in May,
Life. Yes.
right? Like, how cool is that? And we forgot to mention that last night when we were all together, but it was like, she said, "Oh my goodness, I'm actually talking to the artist who's coming on May the 1st." Yes, you are. How cool is that? So now she wants me to go to Niagara Falls in May and go to the concert. And
Yes.
well, I have business up there, so you never know.
Yeah.
It's just
I
crazy
know.
world.
Definitely. Yes.
And who was it that you were talking about the other night? And then this morning they're on the news. Who was that? Tell our listeners, our
Oh
viewers.
no, we were just discussing last night that it's
Yeah.
amazing how uh, I met one of the at that time he was the president of the Atlanta Fed, which is we have 10, we have the regional Fed, which is probably the central bank, uh, head of the central bank is the second most powerful person in the world after U.S. president. So, and these are the very affluent, influential. They sit on a committee, they make decisions. So a few years ago, I met with him, and in a stuff like, what do you think about interest rate? We sat down and talked about our personal lives, and he found out that I'm from Iran, and this is Dennis Lockhart, who was the president of the Atlanta Fed, and he goes, Ramin, I was a Marine, and I was guarding the U.S. Embassy in Tehran in 1977, and it
Whoa.
was one of the best times of, he really enjoyed it. He loved the people. And of course, this is a year prior, or 2 years actually, prior to revolution in Iran. And when we'd had the hostages taken, and that was the same embassy that he was protecting. But thankfully, he left before all this happened. So we were just having this really nice talk, and it was really, heart to heart talk. And then this morning, we talked about him last night, and this morning he's on the Fox Business talking about the FOMC decision, which is tomorrow, about interest rates. And we got Bank of Canada is going to come up with their interest rate decision tomorrow, which they're going to most likely reduce. The central bank in the United States, the Fed, is going to most likely keep it on hold. You never know, but that's what the market is thinking. But he was discussing that, and I was like, oh, here we talked about him last night, and
Right.
he retired. He's part of a faculty in university in Georgia, but yeah, it was a small world. So I saw him this morning, and here we
Isn't
are.
it? When you sent me that newscast, I went, "Oh my gosh, we were just talking about him last night, and you were sharing your experience with him." And this is why, there used to be what we call 6 degrees of separation, right?
Yes,
Well, now you're 2 clicks away.
exactly.
There's no longer, ladies and gentlemen, it's no longer 6 degrees of separation. It's 2 clicks, 1 click maybe,
Right.
and you're next to the person that you want to see.
Yeah.
I'd also like, before we start, to just have you share. We're going to be together again on February 1st, which is Saturday. And this is by invitation only. So if you want an invitation, you have to be invited. So we screen you. So you have to be a friend or an associate or a listener to our show, right? Because this is something very special that you do once a year. So over to you. I'm going to put your email up there in case anybody wants the link.
Yes. So every year, what we do in January, we do our annual forecast for the our year and what we expect and beyond. So we go around the globe, look at uh, what our outlook, for instance, for commodities, for economies around the globe, U.S. stock markets, what's going to happen with crude oil or gold, and interest rates and inflation. So it's usually entertaining, and but we've had it only for our private subscribers. So I thought, well, let's make it something different this year and open up for our listeners and our group. And I believe you will find it informational and hopefully helpful to make decisions for the investment path that you want to take. So it will be on Saturday at 10 o'clock West Coast time, Pacific time, which is 11 o'clock Mountain time, and 1 o'clock, it will be 1 o'clock East Coast time. And for our listeners in Europe, we have listeners in UK and in Asia. So we want to make sure it's convenient for them as well. So it will be like 7 p.m., 8 p.m. in Europe.
Right.
They can reach us as well. So
awesome.
yeah.
So that would be 11 o'clock Mountain time, which is my time. And Eastern is 2 hours ahead. So 1 o'clock for Eastern.
Correct.
And 2 o'clock for East Coast, because they're
Correct.
ahead. Okay.
Correct.
So yeah, perfect. That's a great thing. So we're working up an invitation list. I have some other people that I've confirmed and who are on my list as well that I know would be interested. So thank you for that.
Introducing Veteran House Alliance International Monthly 50/50 Raffle. Purchase your ticket today, link on display, and have a chance to win cash and help a great platform supporting veterans.
All right. Well, I guess that's all of our announcements. A big shout out, though, to the Disability Channel and your participation in the Invictus Games. And All the best with your fundraisers. That's what the performers are going out there for, to perform in the legions out there and raise money for the event. So that's why I love being associated with the channel, because they're always doing good stuff, you know?
Yes.
And we're always doing good stuff. So that's a perfect marriage.
Yeah.
All right. So today you're going to talk to us about credit and credit ratings and how to build credit and how to maintain our credit. So I'm just going to turn the mic over to you. I'm going to get my notepad out and my pen is ready. So over to you for our talk about that today, Ramin.
Awesome. Yes. Before I start that subject, we will go into more of a financial planning.
Sure.
I want to discuss the markets because yesterday was a special day. And
Yeah,
what happened was, the NASDAQ, which is a technology really driven index, it has this worst day since last March. So the market, especially AI, artificial intelligence related stocks, really dove, semiconductors and some energy stocks. So I thought maybe take like a few minutes for our audience to see, give them a little clarity what happened yesterday. Actually, our evenings on Sunday evening, the markets open, the futures market, the global markets have opened. So, the first news in the afternoon, what I hear is all about what's going on with the two planes, armed planes taking the illegal immigrants going to Colombia, and the president of Colombia is reacting to that, and the markets really had a reaction to that because of the tariffs again. Of course, President Trump immediately says, well, there's a 25% tariffs, and US and Colombia have always had a good relationships, and US buys a lot of things, and so there's a relationship. But anyway, so the markets reacted to that, the dollar reacted. But the major news was like it was 4 a.m. and I'm up and I see what's going on. The markets are diving in, especially technology, and then Nvidia, which is the largest artificial intelligence, it's going down. So for our audience, again, if they're not aware what happened over the weekend, there's this Chinese company which is we call it an open AI. They are in artificial intelligence. So if you have used ChatGPT or OpenAI, which is, there's Microsoft or the Google's Genesis. So there is this obviously attraction to the amount of things we can do. And obviously that looks the future. And a lot of companies are investing in that. And it's almost like the beginning of the internet in the 90s, where we were really attracted to that. So basically, there's this company, it's called DeepSeek in China, who came out and it became #1 app ahead of ChatGPT on Apple. It was Apple app. And they could do things that even better than ChatGPT. They had this human interaction in it, in the sense that it's almost analyzing all the things that you're asking, like in a humanly way. But what the information was from China, which is interesting timing, was that they did this, but with investments of only $6 million from this hedge fund. Remember, we're investing billions and billions of dollars in the United States using advanced chips. And according to them, again, you have to take the news from China with a grain of salt. It's not always as transparent, but they declared that they used old chips, microchips, and they used very little money, and they came way ahead of what expectations were. And of course, there's sanctions, and that was the thing that according to Chinese, it forced them to find a way out. So in the short run, obviously, companies like Nvidia got really affected because they're using billions of dollars and using expensive chips. So their stock dropped. And when we look at the market cap, Nvidia was down almost $600 billion in market cap. To give our audience how much of that money, which is the largest drop in any company's valuation, the top 5 companies in Canada, the top 5, if you put them together, their valuation is less than 600 billion. These are 5 top. So in one day, NVIDIA lost more than all the companies put together, the top 5. When we talk about the top 5, is the Royal Bank of Canada, Shopify, you look at Enrich. So you put those 5, that's how much one company just lost in one day. If you want to go United States, out of 10,000 companies, that would have been the 17th company. If you think about ExxonMobil, used to be the largest, its valuation is less than what NVIDIA lost. Or you look at Costco's of the world and MasterCard. So that was huge. So in the long run, though, if that is true, you know what? It's really good for consumers because it forces the companies in the United States which have invested, whether it's the Microsoft of the world, NVIDIA's, and semiconductors in the United States, it forces them to become more efficient. And I don't know if you recall, I know in 1980s, one chip was almost $1,000. Because of the mass applications, like anything else, is that the utility of using these, the prices in 1990s and not 2000 is like 1/10 of a thousandth of a cent for a microchip. So competition, the usage brings efficiency. The same thing when you have like a flat TV. If you recall, if you want to buy, I remember I was in New York and I went to, in 2001, Sony came out with their first flat TV. It was like, I don't know, 45-inch. It was $11,000. Now, my God, you get flat TV for $300. So it is good for consumers. So if that is true, and if they did that, in the long run, I think it's positive. But the markets reacted to that. So that's the reason you saw the markets going down. A side note. This is on the political side. So, Nancy Pelosi, which she's the ex-Speaker of the House, very affluent and influential politicians from San Francisco. She's been very influential in investment decisions, and her and her husband are followed closely for all the stock transactions that they do. Now, there is a question of insider trading. Remember, you are sitting on this committee, right? So somebody it's illegal, but obviously we cannot prove it. But if I'm telling you, listen, because of this regulation, we cannot do this, or you're writing the regulations. Well, since end of 2020, 2021, believe it or not, there is a following on Twitter. About 900,000 people follow what Nancy Pelosi does.
Oh, wow.
We have funds. There are a few funds that had started in 2024 that follow what she does. Large caps is a little difficult, but the small caps, we will discuss it in our investments ideas, like a biotech or medical companies. And listen to this. At the end of December, Nancy Pelosi sold NVIDIA at $138. NVIDIA is at $120 today. So she sold $5 million worth of NVIDIA. She sold close to 20 million or so in Apple. And since then, they've been going down. So anyway, just a food for thought, the influence. So I just want to side note how the politicians actually can take advantage. She's not alone, but she's the most influential one. But anyway, so that's just a side note about our politicians, at least in the United States, and their portfolios. She sold about $35 million, and that's how much profit she had made, a little more. All right, so let's talk about something that I think is important for all our audience, especially not that the interest rates have gone up in these credit cards. It's important to become efficient. So I also want to direct our attention to our younger audience who want to get into the workforce, they are going to start renting, they're going to start uh, buying a car, they're going to eventually buy a house. In United States and most of the Western country, but especially United States and Canada, it's very much important to have a good credit score because it shows your habits. And one word of caution is also a lot of people don't realize that you can have lots of assets. Let's say you're an immigrant, or let's say even someone from Canada comes to the United States. Whatever you've done in Canada stays in Canada. It's like Vegas. Whatever you've done in the United States, and if you go to Canada, it doesn't matter. You start from scratch. So we've had I've worked with some immigrants who've moved here. They've had $10 million in the bank, but they couldn't rent a place or they could not buy something unless they paid cash because the credit institutions, they pay attention to something called FICO scores. And what is FICO? FICO stands for Fair Isaac Corporation. Fair Isaac Corporation was a credit company 30 years ago, came up with this idea that how we can analyze somebody's credit. And therefore, we come with the abbreviation of FICO score. And that's how it started. And about 40 countries around the globe follow this FICO scores. So United States and Canada, they're pretty close. So I'll look at what is a little bit of differences, but a lot of commonality, right? So how do we achieve this? And then I will give some hints to our younger audience how they can actually establish. And also, again, I talked about immigrants. And if you do have a credit score, how you can improve upon that. But in order to understand it, how these FICO scores are scored. So let's start with Canada. Now, in Canada, you can have a score of 300 to 900. And in order to get a good score, well, you're about 90% of your creditors in Canada, they pay attention to your FICO score. So in order to do that, there's 5 factors. And the top 4 is common in the United States. So I will go with the most major one. And again, it goes back to especially a younger audience. If you want to be a good credit, pay attention to this, is your payment history, the habits. And that takes 35% of your score. It comes from your payment history. So pay on time. Don't be late. If you have, they give you 30 days, make sure you paid before the due date. So that's 35%, which is, again, the most important factor, common with the United States and majority of these 40 countries. Number 2 is, we call it credit utilization or amount you owe. So whatever you have, try not to have, let's say you're authorized to have 10,000. Well, the less of that credit that you use, the better it is. So that's called credit utilization. Try to have under 10%. 10 to 30% is acceptable. But once you go, the higher you go, the smaller of the cushion that you have. So if you have 10,000 and you have used 9,000 of it, well, you only got $1,000 left. So that attributes to lower scores. So the less you have, and that's why it's good to pay, your credit cards on time, but also pay it off. Of course, you don't want to pay interest on it, which is tremendous. Nowadays, you can pay 30%. 30%, that's like loan sharks they used to charge people. So basically, that's important to have less of a debt, and that's about 30%. So far, you have 65% just in these 2. Number 3 is your credit history. And this is where we look at the length of the credit that you have. in Canada, and that's about 15%. Now, what happens is the same thing in the United States. The longer the history you have, obviously the better it is, because you have something to see that you've had a good habit of making that payment. So again, for our younger audience, you are in a disadvantage. So I would recommend, this is a good recommendation for our students, college students. As soon as you turn 18, you can actually apply for credit card. So I would recommend to try to apply. In United States, there's Discover Bank. Discover Card, if you're a college student, they give you, they allow you to apply up to $500. Immediately do that. Don't have to, wrap up balances. Use it just once a month, $20, 25, and pay it off. By doing so, within 12 months, now you got that payment history. And you know what they do? Looking at that, they actually increase your available credit. Now you have more, and that goes back to the amount owed, the credit utilization. And you can apply, let's say Citibank allows you. Now you got a history. And let's say if you have a part-time job, that really helps. So I would recommend as soon as you're eligible, apply and try to have two cards, because this way you do have that credit mix. You have different cards, and also you have more available utilization. Now you have two cards with $1,500 available credit. So that's the disadvantage I mentioned about immigrants. They can come to the country and have $10 million, whether it's Canada or United States, but they don't have the history. They don't have payment history. So that is important. So that's, again, both of them are common in United States and Canada. That's 15% of your score. So so far we got 80% commonality. The fourth one is also common, is the credit inquiries. They want to see how many times you've been inquiring in the past 2 years. They look at, are you applying for more credit cards or auto loans and bank loans? And so the more you do, that means maybe the sign of desperation and need. So try to keep it as low as possible. So basically that's 10% of your score. One hint for our audience: if you want to apply for something, the credit cards, and you really want to see it get approved, well, do it within 2 weeks window. What I mean by that, apply for a bank loan, 2 credit cards. Within 2 weeks, they all consolidate under one, so they don't get reported. So that's something. Other than that, if you apply for a credit card, let's say it's Citigroup or Bank of Montreal, and a month later you apply for another one, it doesn't matter you got rejected. It doesn't go against you if you got rejected. All it does, it shows inquiry, and that inquiry stays in your report for 2 years. So in past 2 years, if you've had 5 inquiry, that doesn't look good. So, and then after 2 years and 1 month, it drops off. So try not to apply too many. If you do it like simultaneously. But other than that, that's 10% of your score. So far 90%. We've had our Canadian and our US nationals the same thing. This is where the difference comes. In the United States, what we look at is the credit mix. The creditors like to see you have a different mix of credits. What I mean by that, they like you to have like a mortgage. They like to have your bank loan, different credit cards. In Canada, and that counts for 10%. In Canada, they look at your public records. They want to see that, did you have any negative credit history? And that counts to 10%. Now, in the United States, also, that's very negative. They look at your credit history, but that's additional decision making. So there's no point, but it goes against you, obviously, if you have public records If you've had a bankruptcy, it stays on your records for, again, it's Chapter 13. It stays 7 years, or foreclosure. So be aware of that. Basically, but there's that difference. Of course, again, uh, in Canada, they look at your age of credit, they look at your new loans, they look at debt to income ratio. But those top five is what they give your credit.
We welcome you to advertise and promote your goods and services and or brand your logo to 34 million subscribers on Canada Talks 167. Your investment will go towards our employment programs in the media industry for persons with disabilities and veterans.
Now, as I mentioned, in United States and Canada, there is this number. So if you're between, so the 300 to 900 is in Canada, and in United States is 300 to 850. We hardly have anyone who gets 850. The average credit in United States is about 704. In Canada, I believe it's about 650. But 42% of Canadians, they do have credit of over 800, which is very good. So how these credit ratings work? In the United States, they look at 580 or below. That's not good. 580 to 669, that's fair. And then 670 to 739, that's pretty good. And then if you go from 740 to 799, it's very good. And then from 800 or above is exceptional. In Canada, it's 620 is fair, and 660 to 724, around that. Again, depending on the credit reporting company is good. So why does it matter? Number one, obviously, it gets you to get approved for credit. So if you have under 580, well, 80% of the time you get rejected. So the other thing is you have negotiating power. You pay much less interest if you have a good credit and FICO score. So it's important to have good credit. And again, I look at our younger generations and the younger student. Try to do that as soon as possible. Keep your word, pay on time, and basically not to have quite a bit of debt. So that's, having said that, I want to mention that there is this misconception that, oh, I pay my credit on time, I pay to zero. There is this time difference. So you have a due date, and then, but you generally about 4 or 5 days later is your, or it could be 3 to 5 day window when your next cycle starts. What I mean by that, let's say you have a payment due January 1st. It's the first of the month. That's your due date. You have to pay it by that due date. But the cycle starts the 4th of the month. So there's that interest you have to pay. So if you charge something on the 2nd or 3rd, although you paid it off, let's say you paid everything off, what is reported is on the 4th of the date. So you say, well, I pay off my credit card every month. But guess what? On your record, it shows that if you charge to buy a refrigerator, for instance, on the 3rd of the month, that balance goes on your credit card. So be aware of that. If you're going to charge something, make sure the cycle comes in. The beauty of this, why we charge, there's a few reasons, because you get like 28 days of interest free. So your money's sitting in the bank earning interest, or the stocks or whatever, and then you can pay it off without worrying about paying that interest because you paid it off. The other thing is, nowadays, there's a lot of, obviously, rewards. You can accumulate cash back, or you can actually get rewards for your mileage. So a lot of people do that. So I encourage, if you're in a good habit of paying off your credit cards, if you're a good payer, use that, accumulate rewards, and then pay it off. There's nothing wrong with that. But also, one of the things you have to remember, the activities are important, because sometimes if you're inactive, you say, well, I have all these credit cards, I don't want to use them. And basically, well, sometimes there's inactivity and they can actually discontinue. So it's okay once a year or once in a while, just charge something very small, $20, $15. But also it's important, if you are traveling, you put your airline tickets rather than paying cash, put it on your credit card and then pay it off, because you will earn, obviously, those rewards. Um, One other misconception is, and a lot of that concerts, if you have a good habits, if you're in control, and it goes back our money belief system, right? Some people just cut their credit cards in half and they just send it back, and they're very happy about that. The reason could be because they don't have a control of debt management. But generally, if you're a good debt manager, do not do that, because once those credits that you have, it helps with your credit utilization. What I mean by that, let's say you had $20,000 of available credit and you only use 1,000. So that's 5% utilization. So you get good score for that. But let's say you cut off your $10,000 credit card and say, oh, I don't need that. But guess what? Now your available credit is down to 10,000. So although you have 1,000, now your credit utilization is at 10%. So try to keep and use those cards once a year, as I said, once in a while, and pay it off. So just by cutting, unless you really have no control, you just have this, there's a sale, let me use that, and just I paid later. Those interests, all of a sudden, something you bought for 1,000 ends up costing you 5,000. I mean, if I told you, anyone, would you pay $5,000 for, I don't know, a piece of whatever, the furniture or something, you would say, are you out of your mind? But that's what you end up paying with these high interest rates. One thing I also have to mention, there's a difference in the United States and Canada, is those credit agencies. In Canada, we have the TransUnion and Equifax. In the United States, we have TransUnion and Equifax. They look at the things a little differently, but in the United States, we also have Experian. And Experian used to be TRW, and it doesn't apply too much in Canada, but in the United States, we have Experian. So we have 3 different credit companies. As I mentioned, the FICO, there's a FICO 8. FICO 8 is the most common, but what auto dealers, or even you go buy a car, they look at a different FICO score than if you buy a house or if you go to the bank. So each one looks at differently, but the most common one is the FICO 8, or the TransUnion use the 3. So basically, those are the ones. Of course, you have every country allows you to have once a year to have this fair credit reporting. You can access your credit for free once a year. I do encourage our audience be on top of it. Make sure there's no hanky-panky going on. When COVID happened, I followed. That's why I had my Equifax and my Experian. And then I noticed that somebody applied for a loan, a government loan, for $300,000 on behalf of my business. $300,000, right? But because I was watching my credit reporting, immediately I jumped on that. I called the company, and then this was in Houston, Texas, and the Inspector General, they call it at that time, they said, oh, we noticed something is funny. They said, well, like I had 8 employees and I was eligible for 300,000. So they appreciated my call, but they said there was some red flags we were looking at. So I do encourage our audience, please watch your credit reporting. The good news is nowadays with a lot of credit cards and banks, they allow you to have actually free access whether it's Discover, or is it Citibank, American Express. In Canada, the Bank of Montreal, the Scotia Bank, they allow you to have free access to TransUnion, for instance. If you're a part of Toronto Dominion or TD Bank, you have access to Equifax. Utilize these accesses. Don't ignore it. Don't wait till the credit company inform you, oh, there was a something um, unusual going on your credit report. So it is good to be on top of anything, like anything else. You want to monitor, you want to be on top of your affairs. It takes you maybe once a week for like 2 minutes. That's all it takes you. So please be aware of that. Please make sure that you have access to all kinds of information. And also, you can actually block on your credit reports. What I mean by that is because you don't want, again, maybe somebody has access to your social security and they go and apply on your behalf. If you block that, what that means is it's only up to you to unlock, so you can lock your reporting. So let's say you were at Experian, somebody, or TransUnion or Equifax. In order for the bank or credit card or any institution to access to your credit report, they have to get permission from you. So, for instance, if I want to go and apply for a bank loan, I call my, again, my credit agency. Let's say it's Experian, or let's say TransUnion. Make this available for next 24 hours. And what you do after the 24 hours, you can lock it again. So this way it's locked, so nobody can have access to my credit, and it's free, by the way. So,
wow.
So you can just make sure we are living. We just talked about AI in the beginning of our. There's just so much access to information. There's just a lot of hacking going on. A 14-year-old sitting or 15-year-old sitting in his room or in the basement can do unbelievable things. Brilliant people, unfortunately, in the wrong department, they can do so many things. They can, unfortunately, hack the information. So, just Equifax, for instance, was hacked a couple of years ago, and they had access to all kinds of information. So be aware. So it's okay to monitor like anything else. It's more of a defensive. So
The Disability Channel would like to thank our existing sponsors. We really appreciate the support and kindness from the BIAs across the GTA, Ontario, Canada, and our friends in the USA. We love making new friends. Thank you for supporting our existing employment programs.
So I think the bottom line will be understand how these credit grading works, be on top of that. If you're a young person, apply for. There is nothing wrong with having one or two credit accounts, because you got to go apply for a rent. A lot of these places, they say, well, do you have any history? And if you don't, you have to have a cosigner. But once you build that history, it goes a long way. I mean, you haven't had maybe you had a part-time job, which is always helpful. I encourage our youth, get a job. A part-time job is the best lesson in life. There's nothing like earning your own money, even if it's for 10 hours a week. And this also gives the appreciation of how the government works, the taxes that you pay, or the social security, all the money where it goes. It's a very harsh reality, because a lot of times our students, they live in a utopia, and there's nothing wrong with that. But unfortunately, the reality of life is different. When they have to pay out of their own pocket for something, then they appreciate it a lot more. So the bottom line is, yes, start early, manage it, pay it off, and use it. And basically, that will build your credit history. So
Awesome.
that's in a nutshell. So I hope that was helpful. And,
Yes, because I didn't realize those percentages, like the 35%, 30%, 10% for, I wrote that all down because I was unaware of that.
Oh, good.
I didn't know there were stats attached to that.
Yes.
The other thing is, I just got a message from one of my friends in California. Here's the latest scam if you're traveling. Okay. You check into a hotel, you give them your credit card for authorization. Even if you don't want to use that to pay, they have that on record, because you might go in and say, here's my credit card, but I'm going to pay in cash, or I'm going to pay by debit, right? This latest thing is someone on the outside phones the hotel and said, I'd like to speak to room 601. So they call in to 601. They just think it's a friend or whatever. The voice on the other end says, this is the front desk calling. And we processed your card, but it's not working. Could you please give me those numbers again? And that information again, I need your credit card number, your expiry date, your CVC on the back. Apologies for any misunderstanding. And the average person will just go to their wallet, get out the card, and give that stranger all that information, thinking it's the front desk.
Wow.
Isn't that incredible?
Yeah.
Like, who thinks this stuff up? This was my response to my friend when she put that up. I said, who thinks up this crap? I wouldn't even be able to think that up.
No, it is. Yeah.
Right? The criminal mind? Holy.
Absolutely. There's been quite a few. I mean, I learned the hard way. Thank God. I tell you, one thing is the credit card companies, especially in North America, Europe is just catching up. They really protect. That's why it's not a good idea to pay with your debit card, because banks do not protect you. Because once the money is, they do. I mean, but it takes a long time for the fraud. With credit cards, you have that protection, so it's good to pay with your credit card. But I've been, there's been a few times, and immediately I had to notify. People were buying leather jackets somewhere, and they're I don't spend $2,000 on a leather jacket. I mean, it's like if somebody, I don't know how they did that, but the idea is, again, if you can, to make sure it goes back to the monitoring I check my credit cards activities, and I make sure they are correct. One thing, you're talking about criminal minds. Remember, each state has its own rules. So there's a lot of times these companies will come as legitimate. They will take your card, and then let's say they commit fraud in Colorado. Then they're a fraudulent company. They leave. So they appear they're legitimate. So they get your credit card information. They charge you $1 million, $2 million with different. Then they move on to Idaho. They move on to Alabama. So they have all these options. So by the time somebody catches on, they got charged $50-60 million, and they're out of country. So again, United States, we have all these separate laws. It's getting much better because of the federal laws have happened. But this was happening in the 90s and early 2000 that they were doing that. So just monitor. Be careful. And it's amazing. Like you said, most of us, we are used to paying our credit card information online. We buy everything. We were hesitant in 1990s. If anybody said, oh, use the internet, there's no way. But now we are accustomed. Amazon this, Shopify this. I mean, everything is done online. So we just trust. So in a hotel, and that's a great lesson. You go in person and see that person. Who would do? You're right. So that's
well, the other thing I've always done is I've always had a credit card with just a $500 limit.
Excellent. Yeah.
And I use that for most things because I don't buy anything big on a credit card, but I have a couple of other cards that are larger, but this particular one is the one I use. So if it gets hacked, they can't put anything on it more than $500.
Yes.
So if you've got a credit card with $50,000 on it, I would recommend you get rid of that.
Yes. All right. No, don't get rid of it. It's good, but don't use it.
Don't use it.
Corporate.
You know what I'm saying?
Yes. So Because there is, I mean, I did have a car like in late 90s. I did have a car with a home. I, my credit was 100,000, and that's all my flights. I would use that, but that was, directly with my those days with like a travel agent, right? So
Yeah.
I would
Right.
give, and I would get mileage, so that was really good
Yeah.
with the mileage. And thank God that things did not go wrong. But
Yeah.
after
Well, in the
that,
90s, if it was today, it might be totally different.
it will be, yeah. There's a lot of, unfortunately, like you said, the criminal minds, and we
Mhm.
talk about the gangs, and they are very creative. That's a shame that their compass is the wrong way. So,
Right.
yeah.
And of course, we can use the old Laurie Davis trick. If you want to, get your credit card debt down, you put them in water, stick them in the freezer. And then if you think you need to spend something on something you don't really need, by the time it thaws out, you'll be over the impulse.
Yeah.
So, so if there's something you don't want to use, stick it in the freezer.
Right. No.
Yeah, Sylvia said, wow, these scammers, they are so clever. Too bad they did not use this knowledge to the betterment of life. Hey?
Yeah.
And that's a Canadian thing.
Totally.
Hey? So that's what we're talking about today. So those are very powerful tips. And I really learned more about those percentages. I didn't realize that, 35% of your value in a credit rating is based on your timely payment. Because sometimes we forget to pay, or a week goes by and go, oh gosh, I should have paid that card. But I didn't realize that was a factor. 30% people think if they pay their card once a month, doesn't matter when during the month, as long as they pay it, it's good. But not so, right? These are the little things.
Okay, a little bit. One last thing I have to say, and this is before we go, is a lot of people, if they had difficulty, as you know, it's the 30-day and then the 60-day, and then the clock starts, it goes to your credit report, right? So the 60 days is, the red flag. 30 days, you can actually negotiate. So there's two things I will tell our friends and our audience. They think that if they negotiate, let's say they're having, and it will happen with all these high interest rates. This is the highest we've been as far as the credit card balance people owe in the United States. So they are, who can pay? They're actually 34, 35% interest rate. So people who are living from paycheck to paycheck, it's getting more and more difficult. So what they do, they just let it go. And then now they're accumulating, the bank calls them, then they settle, right? They're happy. Let's say they owed 5,000, they pay 2,000, thinking that, well, the bank said it's okay. The problem is it actually stays on your record. So don't think because you settled, it's against you. So although you made the payment they asked, number one, it's a taxable because it's a loan forgiveness. So that's taxable to you. So if you had 5,000 outstanding debt and you paid 2,000 to settle it, that 3,000 becomes an income at the end of the year. The second thing is, I would recommend, if you're having a difficulty and this is not just a month, 2 months, always be proactive. Unfortunately, what we do things is reactive. We fall behind and then go after that. I would recommend a lot of credit card companies, which is issued by banks. So credit company like Visa or MasterCard, or they're not a bank. They are the ones, they charge the fees to the businesses and the individual. It's the banks who are issuing it. So go to your bank. Is it Bank of Montreal or Citibank or Chase? Tell them, listen, I'm having difficulties. And its interest rates are very high. I like to work something out with you. And they say, what do you like to do? They say, well, you know what? Every month I have to pay $300 just in interest. I like to freeze my account. So I promise I would not use my account again. And they come up with a payment plan for you on 0%. So let's say you owe $10,000 and every month you're paying $200, $300 just an interest plus what you're paying. So if you do that, they generally come up with a 60-month loan payment on a 0%. So now you're dividing the 10,000 on 60 months, which is a lot more affordable than just paying that interest on that loan. And it does not go negative on your account based on payment history. As we said, that's the biggest one, 35%. It will reduce, obviously, the 30%, it's that utilization, because now you don't have that availability. But if you had the difficulty, you're already in the top of the range. If you had 10,000 and you've used 9,500, you're already in trouble anyway. So close that, get a negotiation with your bank. They usually are very good. They charge 0 to 1% and just have a payment plan, just as a last resort. So don't wait till you become late, please.
Right.
Now, one time, if you're late, 30 days, they are very good. They work with you. There's a forgiveness. There's a payment fee, like $30 or so. They waive that. But if you do that more than once, then you're in trouble. So, and just a last little tip. So.
Right on. Well, that is very, very, very valuable information. And of course, since COVID, I know here in Alberta, a lot of people had to resort to living from their credit cards and accumulated huge amounts of debt that they weren't planning on. And now people are really struggling. So this has been very valuable. And thank you so very much for choosing this topic for today. It's very timely, right? Right, everybody? Wow, perfect. All right. Well, you've been watching the Laurie Davis Show, the Dr. Laurie Davis Show, and my good friend and colleague, Dr. Ramin Modiri, our financial guru. And we'll be back tomorrow at the same time, 12 noon Mountain Time, with the Wednesday version of the Dr. Laurie Davis Show. And then on Thursday, Mr. Doug Smith and I are getting together, and we're interviewing Dave Stevens in the United States. And Dave is our Disability Channel representative and accredited media person for the Super Bowl. So he will be our guest on Thursday. All right. So have a great day. Like Red Green used to say, keep your stick on the ice, and we'll talk to you soon.
Yes, we'll see hopefully everyone on Saturday. So
you bet. Yes, Saturday, February 1st.
Yes.
Bye for now.
Bye-bye. Bye.
Brenda liked to drink red wine and smoke Marlboro Light. She kept the house real tidy in the kitchen every night. Her husband had a tendency of spending late nights at the bar, spent his entire paycheck, worn out and crashed the car. Well, Brenda got real sick of spending all her nights alone, so she packed her bags, wrote out a note saying, "This house ain't my home. You've been cheating, you've been lying, you've been drinking, I've been crying. I ain't gonna spend one more tear on you. I've done hurting, I'm done trying. You're still flirting, there's no denying all the stupid stuff you put me through. Well, you ain't messing with my heart no more." She left the cigarette in the ashtray and the wine spilled on the floor. Hey! 10 miles down the road, Brenda turned that car around. She needed some closure before she headed out of town. She knew where he'd be at by the charges on his card. She saw him doing shots with the tall blonde at the bar. They locked eyes and she prepared to give what he deserved. This would be the last time he would ever cheat on her. She said, "You've been cheating, you've been lying, you've been drinking, I've been crying. I ain't gonna spend one more tear on you. I'm done hurting, I'm done trying. You're still flirting, there's no denying all the stupid stuff you put me through. Well, you ain't messing with my heart no more." She left the cigarette in the ashtray and the wine spilled on the floor. Hey! spilled on the floor.